My husband's family took over my housewarming party and told everyone it was their home. The first person to call my house hers was my mother-in-law. Standing beneath a chandelier she had tried to make me return, she lifted a champagne glass toward 42 people gathered in my living room and smiled as if she had personally laid every floorboard beneath their feet. "Welcome," Carol Hartwell announced, "to our family's new home." The applause came before anyone noticed that I was not smiling. My husband, Nathan, stood beside her with one hand in his pocket and the other wrapped around a drink. His eyes found mine for half a second, then moved away. That was when I understood that Carol had not misspoken. She was not tipsy, confused, or carried away by the occasion. She believed what she had said, and Nathan had known she planned to say it. The house was a 3-story brick Victorian on Alder Street, with a deep porch, 4 bedrooms, a library, and a sunroom that caught the afternoon light like a glass lantern. It had also been mine for 6 years. I bought it when I was 32, 2 years before I met Nathan. At the time, it had a leaking roof, knob and tube wiring, raccoons in the attic, and a kitchen last updated when avocado appliances were fashionable. Friends called it ambitious. My father called it a money pit. I called it the first thing in my life that nobody could take away by changing their mind. I had grown up moving whenever a landlord raised the rent. My mother and I learned to pack a kitchen in under an hour. She died when I was 28, leaving me a small life insurance policy and a note telling me to use it for something that would make me feel safe. I combined it with 4 years of bonuses from my design work and bought Alder House. Every repair after that came from my earnings, documented down to the last invoice. Nathan entered the story after the structure was sound, but before the house was beautiful. He liked to joke that he married me for my crown molding. In the beginning, the joke felt affectionate. He was warm, funny, and easy in ways I was not. Where I measured a room before buying a chair, Nathan could bring home a lamp because it made him happy. He worked in medical equipment sales, traveled often, and seemed proud of my independence. When I told him Alder House was premarital property and that I wanted a prenuptial agreement, he kissed my forehead and said he would never ask me to risk the one place where I felt secure. His parents were less gracious. Carol called the agreement cold. Dennis, Nathan's father, asked whether I expected the marriage to fail. His younger sister Brianna joked that I must be hiding millions in the walls. Nathan defended me then. He told them the house was mine, the decision was reasonable, and the subject was closed. I believed him. We married in a small hotel ballroom and lived in Nathan's apartment while the final renovation was completed. Nathan paid that rent. I paid the mortgage and construction costs. The arrangement was written into the prenup so clearly that both lawyers called it unusually tidy. The housewarming party was meant to celebrate the end of 4 years of restoration and the beginning of our married life there. I planned a Saturday evening with simple food, candles on the terrace, and the people who had actually seen the house when its dining room ceiling was on the floor. Carol offered to help with flowers. That offer became the first loose thread in a knot I should have noticed sooner. She asked for the guest list so she could estimate centerpieces. Then she said paper invitations would look more elegant. I told her digital invitations were fine, but she had already ordered stationery. Nathan said letting her handle one detail would make her feel included. The invitation arrived at my office 3 days later. Across the top, in gold script, it read, "The Hartwell family requests the pleasure of your company at a celebration of our new home." My name appeared beneath Nathan's in smaller print. I called him immediately. "It's just wording," he said. "You know how Mom is about family." "It is my house." "Our home, Elena. You wanted me to think of it as ours." There was truth in that, but he used it like a curtain. I wanted my husband to feel at home. I did not want his parents announcing ownership. He promised to speak to Carol. That evening, he told me she had mailed only a few invitations and would correct the rest. I later learned there had never been a corrected version. By the morning of the party, Carol's flowers had multiplied into a full decorating team. A caterer I had not hired was setting up in my kitchen. Brianna taped handwritten signs to bedroom doors. Mom and Dad's suite, Brianna's room, and, on the smallest guest room, future nursery. Dennis rolled a portable bar across my newly refinished floor without lifting it over the threshold. I pulled off the signs. Nathan laughed too loudly and said his sister was being silly. Then guests began arriving, many of them strangers to me. Carol's book club friends, Dennis's golf partners, Nathan's cousins from 2 states away. They brought gifts addressed to the Hartwells and congratulated Carol on finally finding the perfect place for everyone. I looked for Nathan, but he was carrying cases of wine to the cellar with his father. At 7:40, Carol tapped a spoon against her glass and gathered everyone beneath my chandelier. She thanked the contractor, although she got his name wrong. She thanked Nathan for bringing this wonderful property into the family. Then she announced that Alder House would become the permanent center of Hartwell holidays, that Dennis was already planning a garden, and that she looked forward to waking up in her room once their current lease ended in 6 weeks. That was when she raised her glass. "Welcome to our family's new home." Everyone applauded. I did not correct her immediately. I looked at Nathan, at Brianna grinning beside the fireplace, and at the gold invitations scattered across the entry table. Then I noticed 2 small things: a moving company brochure beside Carol's purse, and a brass key on Dennis's ring that looked exactly like the copies Nathan had picked up that morning. I understood, in one clean and terrible moment, that the party was not a celebration they had taken over. It was an announcement of a plan already in motion. So I lifted my own glass and smiled. If they wanted an audience, I decided, they were going to have one for the truth. Carol expected me to thank her. I could see it in the gracious tilt of her head when she handed me the spoon. Around us, guests waited with the pleased curiosity of people who believed they had been invited into a charming family milestone. Nathan finally moved closer, putting his palm against the small of my back as if physical contact could pass for loyalty. I looked at the room I had rebuilt. Every restored surface held a history that the Hartwells had reduced to a backdrop for their claim. "Thank you all for coming," I said. Nathan exhaled. "Alder House has been my project for 6 years, so seeing it filled with people is overwhelming. I purchased it in 2020, before I met Nathan, and completed the restoration this month. Many of you are here for the first time, and I hope you enjoy seeing the work." The room changed by degrees. Smiles became uncertain. A woman near the piano lowered her glass. Carol's expression remained fixed, but her fingers tightened around the stem. "Nathan moved in with me 2 weeks ago," I continued. "I'm happy to share my home with my husband. There has apparently been a misunderstanding, however. No other Hartwell family members are moving into this house." Dennis made a sound that might have been a laugh if it had contained any humor. "Elena," Nathan whispered. "The labels placed on the guest rooms were jokes," I said, looking directly at Brianna. "The copies of my house keys were not authorized. Please return them before leaving." Nobody applauded that time. Carol stepped toward me. "This isn't the place for private family discussions." "You made the discussion public." Her cheeks flushed beneath carefully applied makeup. "I was speaking symbolically. We are all family now." "Then why did you announce that you were moving in when your lease ends?" A whisper traveled through the room. Carol's friend Lorna suddenly became fascinated by the flowers. Nathan took the spoon from my hand. "Let's all get some food. Mom got carried away because she's excited. Elena has been under enormous stress with the renovation." There it was. Not an apology, but an explanation for my behavior. I was stressed. Carol was excited. Nathan was reasonable. The story rearranged itself around him before the last word left his mouth. I could have ended the party, but if I reacted in anger, the Hartwells would reduce the evening to my temper. If I let it continue, they might show me more. I put the spoon on the bar and said dinner was ready. For the next 2 hours, I observed Dennis describe his future wine cellar, Brianna take selfies on my bed, and Carol explained that my library would make a better television room. One of Nathan's aunts asked whether Carol would bring her furniture. Carol replied that Elena had good bones, but too much modern taste, so they would blend styles. Not once did Nathan correct them. At 9:15, I found him in the pantry. "How many keys did you copy?" I asked. Dennis turned away. 3. "Why?" "Emergency access." "For whom?" "My parents and Brianna. Their family." I held out my hand. "Get them back." Dennis laughed softly. "You don't issue orders to my son." "I'm issuing an order about access to my property." Nathan's face hardened. "Can we not perform our marriage in front of Dad?" The irony was almost elegant. "You performed it in front of everyone else." He followed me into the hallway and caught my arm. I looked at his hand until he released me. "They're having money problems," he said under his breath. "Their rent increased. Dad's consulting work dried up. We have all this space. We have never discussed them living here." "I knew you would say no before hearing the details." "So you said yes for me?" "I said we would find a solution." Behind him, Carol was showing someone the sunroom and calling it her breakfast room. I asked Nathan when he planned to tell me. He said after the party, when I had seen how naturally everyone fit. It was not supposed to be permanent, he explained. 6 months, perhaps a year. Brianna might stay too, because her roommate was moving. The nursery sign was only a joke, although Carol did hope we would start trying soon. Each sentence removed another wall from the marriage I thought I inhabited. "Did you invite these people to pressure me?" I asked. "No one is pressuring you." I pointed toward the living room, where his mother had just received a housewarming gift from a guest I did not know. Nathan rubbed his forehead. "You always make everything about ownership. A marriage is not a ledger." "A marriage is also not adverse possession." He stared at me. I had designed law offices for 12 years. I knew just enough property vocabulary to frighten people who preferred vagueness. At 10, guests began leaving. Several thanked Carol rather than me. Lorna squeezed my hand and whispered that she had not realized. I stood beside the front door and collected keys. Brianna surrendered hers with theatrical annoyance. Dennis claimed he had left his in the kitchen, then produced it when I said I would deactivate the locks anyway. Carol told me she did not carry keys in evening bags. I watched her open a small interior pocket and remove a brass copy wrapped in tissue. Nathan waited until the last car left before he exploded. He accused me of humiliating his parents, embarrassing him, and turning a generous gesture into a public trial. He said Carol had spent thousands on the party. I asked who authorized her to spend it. He said that was not the point. "What is the point?" I asked. "That you care more about a building than people." I looked past him at wine rings on the piano, mud on the stair runner, and the crooked guest room signs Brianna had taped back onto the doors after I removed them. "No," I said. "I care about consent." Nathan slept in the guest room that night. I stayed awake in the library with my laptop. At 1 in the morning, I logged into the security system and revoked every access code except mine. At 1:15, I emailed the locksmith who had worked on the restoration and requested an emergency visit. At 1:30, I opened the folder containing the deed, prenup, mortgage history, contractor invoices, and insurance policy. Then I checked our joint credit card account. Carol had not paid for the party. Nathan had charged $11,842.67 to us. The caterer, flowers, rentals, engraved invitations, wine, and a deposit to a moving company were all there. The moving company charge had been made 3 weeks earlier. I stared at it until dawn. The toast had been the smallest lie in the room. By 7 the next morning, Nathan had changed tactics. Anger had failed, so he tried tenderness. He brought coffee to the library and sat on the edge of the sofa with the careful posture of a man entering negotiations he intended to call a conversation. He said we had both been emotional. He apologized for the party getting out of hand. He did not apologize for spending our money, copying the keys, or promising rooms to his family. When I showed him the moving company charge, his face did not register surprise. "It was only a reservation," he said, "for 6 weeks from now." they needed to hold a date. Before I agreed? He told me deposits were refundable. I asked whether his promises were too. Nathan set the coffee down. He explained that his parents had co-signed his first car loan, paid part of his college tuition, and helped him during a period of unemployment. He said he had always intended to repay them. Alderhouse offered a way to do that without writing checks every month. By giving them something that belongs to me, I said, by sharing space we are not using. You are not using my office. Does that mean you can give it away? He called the question extreme. I called the moving deposit extreme. We circled the truth until he finally admitted that his parents expected to stay at least 2 years. 2 years became until they got stable. Stability in the Hartwell family was a destination everyone promised to reach using someone else's fuel. I asked Nathan to leave for a few days. He refused at first, saying it was his home too. I agreed that he lived there and told him I was not evicting him. I was asking for space to think about a serious breach of trust. He packed a suitcase only after I said I would stay in a hotel if he would not go. Before leaving, he stood in the foyer beneath the chandelier and told me I was making a mistake I would regret. I already regret a mistake, I said. I'm deciding what to do about it. The locksmith arrived at 9. By noon, every exterior cylinder had been replaced. Nathan retained a code because he still lived there. His family did not. Then I began looking for the edges of the plan. The cameras showed Carol measuring guest suite windows and photographing closets. Dennis toured the garage with a contractor I did not recognize. Brianna entered alone with a copied key 2 days before the party and tried clothes against my bedroom mirror. I called my alarm company and requested an access report. I downloaded the videos to an encrypted drive. Then I searched the shared tablet Nathan had left in the kitchen. I did not open his private email, but the screen lit with notifications from a group chat called Alderhouse Plans. The name was enough. Nathan and I shared a phone plan, and the tablet mirrored messages sent to the household account. I opened the thread. There were 8 months of conversations. Carol began with suggestions disguised as compliments. By spring, Nathan discussed moving his parents in before I became too settled into every room. Brianna claimed the west bedroom. Carol told her to wait until the housewarming makes it official. One message from Nathan sat alone between photographs of furniture. Once everyone is there and her friends see how happy Mom and Dad are, Elena won't throw them out. She hates public conflict. We just need to get through the door. I read it 3 times. My husband had studied my restraint and turned it into a strategy. The shared calendar listed the moving date, furniture deliveries, a garage conversion, and a plumber for the guest suite. Carol had also planned a family dedication with a photographer. The housewarming party had not been the finish line. It was proof of concept. I forwarded the visible account records and messages to myself, then called Mara Singh, the attorney who had represented me during the prenup. I had not spoken to her in 4 years. When she answered, I said I needed advice about keeping relatives from moving into premarital property. "Have they moved in?" she asked. "Not yet." "Good. Keep it that way." Mara's voice had the calm efficiency of a locked door. She told me not to threaten, negotiate informally, or dispose of property if it arrived. She asked for the deed, prenup, footage, invoices, and account statements. My written objection, she said, needed to be unmistakable. That afternoon, we drafted notices stating that Carol, Dennis, and Brianna had no permission to enter, occupy, store property at, receive mail at, contract for work on, or represent ownership of Alderhouse. Mara also told me to check postal records. At the post office, I learned Carol and Dennis had submitted address changes effective the week of their planned move. I found 2 unopened packages in their names hidden in my garage. I photographed them and texted Nathan that he needed to collect and return them. His reply came within a minute. "You hired a lawyer against my parents?" I did not answer the accusation. I sent him the joint card statement and asked whether there were other expenses or commitments I had not seen. He wrote that married people did not interrogate each other through text. I replied that married people did not schedule moving trucks behind each other's backs. By evening, Carol had left 6 voicemails, moving from tears to accusations of elder abuse. She called Alderhouse family property, then insisted she had never wanted it. On Wednesday, I refused delivery of a fully paid king-size bed addressed to Carol Hartwell. Nathan called and demanded to know where his parents would sleep when they came to discuss this like adults. "Not here," I said. He went silent. For the first time, he understood that the door would not open simply because his family decided it should. Nathan returned on Thursday with his father and a folder. The exterior camera notified me before they reached the porch. I was in the library with Mara, reviewing the belongings Nathan might claim if our separation continued. I watched him try his old code twice. I opened the door but left the security chain engaged. Nathan held up the folder. "We need to talk." "You can come in," I said. "Your father cannot." Dennis stepped forward. "I have every right to support my son." From the sidewalk. He looked past me and saw Mara. His confidence changed shape. Nathan entered alone. I introduced Mara and explained that she was advising me regarding the property, unauthorized expenditures, and our potential separation. He stared at me as though the word separation had been a weapon I concealed unfairly. "You're destroying a marriage over guest rooms," he said. "No, I'm responding to 8 months of planning and an $11,000 charge." He opened his folder. Inside were printouts of transfers from his personal account to our joint household account. Over 2 years, he had transferred $1,500 each month. He placed the pages on the dining table and said he had contributed $36,000 to Alderhouse, which meant his family's use of it was not charity from me. I almost admired the preparation. Then I read the transaction labels. "These were your half of groceries, utilities, insurance, and cleaning," I said. "Money is fungible." Mara asked whether any transfer had been identified as a mortgage payment, capital improvement, purchase contribution, or acquisition of equity. Nathan said ordinary couples did not label every dollar. She pointed to the prenup clause, stating that household contributions did not create ownership interests in separately held property. Nathan accused me of hiding behind technicalities. The technicality was his signature. He said marriage had transformed the house emotionally, if not legally. He had selected furniture, entertained clients, assembled the terrace grill, and helped choose light fixtures. No decent spouse, he said, would use paperwork to make him feel disposable. I told him he was not disposable. His promises were, "You told your mother she could live here," I said. "You gave her keys. You spent joint money to stage a public claim. You wrote that once they were inside, I would not throw them out. Which part of that was emotional partnership?" He looked at Mara, then back at me. "You read private messages." "Messages on our shared household tablet about my house." "That doesn't make it right." "Neither did any of what I found." For an hour, Nathan explained himself without accepting responsibility. His parents were desperate. I was intimidating. Carol was dramatic. Brianna had nowhere stable to go. Each reason contradicted another, but all ended at the same conclusion. My consent was an obstacle he felt entitled to route around. Mara remained silent until he mentioned children. "Was there a plan regarding Ms. Ortiz's reproductive decisions as well?" she asked. Nathan stood so quickly his chair struck the floor. The answer was in his anger. After he left, I returned to the group chat. I searched the word baby. Carol had written that once she moved in, she could help us get serious about a family. Brianna joked about poking holes in condoms. Nathan replied with a laughing emoji, then said I would come around when the house felt less like a project and more like a Hartwell home. I sat in the library until the daylight faded from the windows. There are betrayals that arrive like explosions. This one arrived like a blueprint. Every message showed another room in a future designed around me without including me. My money would provide the walls. My body would provide the child. My discomfort would be renamed selfishness. Nathan would stand between everyone and call surrender a compromise. I told Mara I wanted to separate formally. She did not congratulate me or say she had expected it. She asked practical questions: where Nathan would stay, what accounts we shared, what automatic payments existed, whether I feared escalation, and whether firearms were stored in the house. Her calm gave me somewhere to place my fear. We froze the joint credit card after paying legitimate pending charges. I transferred half the remaining joint checking balance into a new account and documented the amount. I changed passwords for utilities and vendor portals tied to the property. The following day, a process server delivered the no-access notices to the Hartwells and separation papers to Nathan at his parents' apartment. Carol posted a party photograph beneath my chandelier and wrote that some women weaponized money against the families who welcomed them. She claimed Nathan had built a home only to be locked out without warning. The post gathered sympathy quickly. People who had never met me called me controlling. One of Dennis's cousins wrote that a wife who kept assets separate had never intended to stay married. Brianna posted a photograph of the guest room sign and called it the bedroom my brother built for his parents. I wanted to answer every sentence. Instead, I made a folder called Public Claims and saved screenshots. Mara advised silence unless misinformation affected my work or safety. They are trying to pull you into the arena where volume looks like evidence, she said. We will stay where evidence is evidence. My restraint infuriated them more than any rebuttal could have. 3 days later, Carol created a public event at Alder House called Hartwell Homecoming, Family Stands Together. Guests would support Nathan at his rightful home. More than 60 people marked themselves interested. I sent the listing to Mara. Then I called the police non-emergency line, my security company, and the neighbor across the street. If the Hartwells arrived with another audience, I would be ready. This time, nobody was crossing the threshold. Sunday began with rain. At 8, I checked the cameras with the security technician. The side gate was locked, the garage disconnected from Nathan's old remote, and a temporary sign stated that entry required the owner's permission. Officer Bell stopped by. I showed her the deed, notices, event page, and photographs. She said officers could act on trespass, threats, property damage, or refusal to leave after notice, and encouraged me to remain inside. At 11:40, the moving truck appeared. It turned onto Alder Street, followed by Carol's SUV, Dennis's pickup, Brianna's sedan, and 7 cars. A banner across the rear door read, "Welcome home, Mom and Dad." Someone filmed from the passenger window. My hands shook, but not from doubt. Dennis parked across my driveway. Nathan stepped out of his parents' SUV wearing the navy sweater I had given him the previous Christmas. He looked toward the upstairs windows and spoke to Carol. She straightened her coat, arranged her expression, and walked to the porch with a ring of guests behind her. She pressed the bell. I answered through the intercom. "You do not have permission to enter or unload anything here. Please leave the property." Carol looked directly into the camera. "Elena, sweetheart, we are not doing this through a machine. The written notice was delivered 4 days ago. Please leave." Nathan stepped forward. "This is my residence." "You may schedule a time through council to collect your belongings. Your parents and these guests are not invited." Someone behind him muttered that I was unbelievable. Brianna lifted her phone higher, broadcasting everything. Dennis walked past the porch toward the side gate. The security technician, watching from his vehicle, called the police. I saw Dennis pull once at the locked latch, then twice. He kicked the bottom of the gate hard enough to shake the camera. That ended the performance of peaceful homecoming. Officer Bell arrived with another patrol car within 6 minutes. By then, movers had opened the truck, and Carol was directing them to place boxes on the sidewalk. The supervisor stopped when I said the delivery was unauthorized. His work order listed Carol as the customer and my house as the destination. Under access instructions, someone had written, "Son owns property. Wife may be emotional. Proceed with husband's authorization." Officer Bell read that line twice. Nathan said he had not written it. Carol said the moving coordinator must have misunderstood. The supervisor, suddenly aware that his employees were being broadcast online, ordered the truck closed. Dennis accused me of calling police on family. I reminded him that he was standing at a gate he had just kicked. The second officer asked everyone not residing at the property to move to the public sidewalk. Most guests complied. A few slipped away to their cars. The rain strengthened, flattening Carol's hair and soaking the welcome banner. Then Lorna arrived. She parked halfway down the block and approached under a red umbrella. Carol greeted her with visible relief, apparently expecting reinforcement. Instead, Lorna handed Officer Bell a printed copy of the original housewarming invitation and said Carol had told her months earlier that Elena had agreed to transfer partial ownership to Nathan after the renovation. "I asked Elena at the party because I wanted the name of her real estate lawyer," Lorna said. That was when I realized none of it was true. Carol's face changed. Lorna continued. She had helped address the invitations. She had heard Carol tell multiple guests that Nathan's parents were buying into the property and that the party would celebrate a multi-generational family estate. Carol had asked guests to bring gifts appropriate for the common areas because Elena already had enough personal things. Nathan looked at his mother. "You told people they were buying in?" It was the first time I saw him confront her, and even then he sounded more surprised than betrayed. Carol said she had used simplified language because outsiders did not need financial details. Dennis said everyone was missing the spirit of the occasion. Brianna stopped filming when the live comments turned against them. Officer Bell told the Hartwells to remove the boxes from the sidewalk and leave. Dennis refused until she warned him that another attempt to enter could result in arrest. The movers reloaded everything. Guests dispersed. Nathan remained in the rain after his parents' vehicles pulled away. He asked if he could come inside. I spoke through the intercom because opening the door would have turned the moment into something intimate that it no longer was. "Not today." I didn't know she told people they were buying the house. "You knew she was moving in." "I thought we could work that out." "You thought you could make it harder for me to say no." He wiped rain from his face. "I was trying to help my parents. With my home and our money." He said he loved me. I believed that he believed it. Love, in Nathan's vocabulary, was a feeling that excused the choices made around it. He loved me, therefore my boundaries injured him. He loved his parents, therefore their needs became obligations for me. He loved the idea of a full house, therefore he could fill mine without permission. I told him Mara would contact his attorney. After he left, I sat on the foyer floor and cried for the first time. The doors had stayed closed, and the truck had left full, but I remembered Nathan helping me choose the chandelier, making ridiculous faces through glass samples until I laughed. That memory still belonged to me. It simply no longer proved what I once thought it proved. By evening, Brianna's interrupted live stream had been copied and reposted. The clip of Lorna describing Carol's ownership story spread through their social circle. Comments shifted. People asked why Nathan's parents had hired movers without the owner's approval. Someone paused the video on the moving order and read the warning about an emotional wife. Carol deleted her original post. I did not celebrate. I called a gate repair company, made tea, and slept in the library because the bedroom felt too full of ghosts. The next morning, Mara called with news that made the party charges look small. During the financial disclosures for our separation, Nathan's attorney had identified transfers from our joint savings account that I had not authorized. Over 18 months, Nathan had sent his parents $38,000. The money had been labeled as vendor payments. The vendor names were fake. The first fraudulent transfer was for $2,400, disguised as a payment to DH Consulting, Dennis Hartwell's initials. The next went to C Home Services, Carol. Others hid behind similar labels, ordinary enough to disappear among utilities and insurance premiums. Nathan had not stolen mortgage money. The house remained separate, and I paid its expenses from my personal account. He had taken from our joint future, the savings we planned to use for travel, emergencies, and, someday, parental leave. Some transfers covered his parents' rent, others paid credit card balances and Brianna's car repair. $9,000 funded a failed wellness franchise Carol had not mentioned. Nathan had disguised the transactions because he knew I would object. When confronted through counsel, he called them family support. Mara called them undisclosed dissipation of joint assets. The precise legal label would depend on the divorce proceedings, but the moral label was already clear. I filed for divorce the following week. It did not feel triumphant. I had searched for a version of the marriage that could survive the evidence, but every path required me to treat a pattern as an accident. Nathan asked for counseling. I agreed to one session, not to save the marriage, but because I wanted to know whether he understood what he had done. The counselor asked him why he had hidden the transfers. "Elena is rigid about money," he said. She asked why he had promised his parents occupancy without consulting me. "She is rigid about the house." She asked what he believed my role in the marriage had been. Nathan paused. "To build a life with me." "And what was your role?" "To connect that life to my family." He said it with sincerity. That was the saddest part. In his mind, I built and he connected. I earned, planned, purchased, restored, saved, and protected. He opened the doors and distributed the benefits. My resistance was not self-defense. It was a failure to appreciate his generosity. I did not schedule a second session. Carol told relatives I had manipulated Nathan into an unfair prenup. Dennis claimed I used police to steal his son's residence. Brianna said I cared more about hardwood floors than people. Then discovery began. Nathan's messages, the financial transfers, the moving order, and the renovation records were exchanged between attorneys. The prenup had been negotiated by separate counsel, signed months before the wedding, and accompanied by full financial disclosures. There was no hidden equity, surprise clause, or last-minute pressure. Alderhouse had been mine before Nathan knew my middle name. His legal position narrowed. He initially requested reimbursement for half the increase in the house's value during the marriage. My appraisers separated market appreciation from capital improvements paid by me. Nathan could document no investment in the property beyond household contributions addressed in the prenup. He listed 40 hours of personal labor, including assembling a grill, hanging 3 pictures, and carrying tile samples. My attorney offered to return the grill. The offer offended him more than any legal argument. Meanwhile, the joint account transfers became difficult to explain. Nathan's attorney advised settlement. He would receive his half of legitimate joint assets, reduced by an agreed share of the concealed payments and party charges. He would keep his retirement account, car, clothing, and personal property. He would leave Alderhouse without an ownership claim. Neither side would receive spousal support. Nathan rejected the first offer because Carol told him accepting it would admit wrongdoing. 2 weeks later, Dennis lost his consulting contract. The client was not interested in the family dispute, but the moving day video had circulated among local business owners. What concerned them was the work order note instructing movers to proceed over an owner's expected objection. Dennis had recommended the moving company through a professional contact and had repeatedly claimed his son owned the property. The client questioned his judgment and ended a month-to-month arrangement. Carol's social circle fractured. Lorna and 3 others left the book club after members accused her of disloyalty. Carol's story could not survive the second party's footage. I felt no pleasure watching their consequences. They did not restore sleep or return trust. They simply made denial more expensive. Nathan finally accepted mediation. We sat across from each other at a conference table. He looked thinner. Our attorneys discussed numbers, then furniture. He wanted my premarital sofa because his parents needed one. He received the dining set Carol ordered for the party after assuming its remaining balance. At the end, the mediator asked whether there were personal matters we needed to address. Nathan looked at me. Was there any point when you would have let them stay? The question revealed that he still believed the tragedy was my answer, not his method. If you had come to me before making promises, I said, I would have helped them find a smaller apartment. I might have offered a short, written stay during a real emergency. I would have reviewed their budget with them. I would have done many things, but not given them rooms. Not because they claimed them. He rubbed the edge of the settlement draft. Mom said once you saw us all together, you would understand what family felt like. My mother and I moved 7 times before I was 18. I know exactly what family feels like. It feels like asking before you risk someone else's home. He signed the settlement. Under supervision, Nathan collected his clothes, electronics, photographs, terrace grill, and dining set. He paused beneath the chandelier. My mother says you'll regret being alone in a place this big. I looked around the foyer. Your mother has said many things about this house that were not true. He left his key on the console table. This time, it was the only copy he had. For several months after the divorce, I kept the guest room doors closed. The security system was upgraded, the gate repaired, and the decree left no ambiguity. I kept the doors closed because each room carried a label I could still see after the tape residue was gone. Mom and Dad's suite, Brianna's room, future nursery. The labels were childish, but the assumptions beneath them were not. Carol loved Alder House once she could call it something Nathan brought into the family. Dennis respected it once he imagined directing its use. Brianna admired my rooms while assigning them to herself. Nathan celebrated my independence until it interfered with what he wanted to give away. I began reclaiming the rooms slowly. The East guest room became a studio for pro bono design work. I partnered with a nonprofit that renovated transitional housing for women leaving unsafe homes. Once a month, volunteers met at Alder House to review floor plans, select durable materials, and assemble welcome kits. The irony was not lost on me, but neither was the difference. Every resident received a key to a room offered with consent. The West Room became a real guest room, not a symbolic one. My friend Tessa stayed there while recovering from ankle surgery. My cousin and her daughter used it during a college tour. Lorna, unexpectedly, became a friend and spent one snowy weekend there after a pipe burst in her apartment. Each person arrived because I invited them and left without acting as if gratitude purchased ownership. The smallest room, the one Brianna labeled as a nursery, became a reading room. I painted it deep green, installed shelves around the window, and placed my mother's old armchair in the corner. I did not make decisions about children to defy the Hartwells. I simply stopped treating my future as a room other people could name before I entered it. Work changed too. The owner of my design firm had watched me manage the Alder House crisis while leading a major hotel renovation. She offered me a partnership track, saying I had the rare ability to protect a vision without making every disagreement personal. I almost laughed. The skill had been expensive to acquire. I accepted. The promotion bonus paid off the final restoration loan. I placed the confirmation beside my mother's note in the fireproof box. Safety was not the absence of people, it was the presence of choice. I heard about the Hartwells only indirectly. Carol and Dennis moved to a smaller apartment 30 minutes away. Brianna moved in with them after her roommate left, which made the arrangement she had proposed for my house unnecessary. Dennis returned to full-time work. Carol sold the adjustable bed that had never crossed my threshold. Nathan rented a 1-bedroom condominium near his office. On what would have been our anniversary, Nathan wrote that he finally understood he had tried to force 2 definitions of family into one house. I did not respond. Understanding can be sincere without creating an obligation to reopen the door. 6 months after the divorce, I received a letter from him. He wrote that he had begun individual therapy. He admitted that his family had treated his role as provider like a debt he could never finish paying. As a child, he earned peace by agreeing with the loudest person. As an adult, he repeated the pattern and expected me to absorb its cost. He said he had confused avoiding his mother's disappointment with protecting the people he loved. The letter did not ask me to return. That made it the first apology that felt like one. I kept it for a week, then placed it in the file with the divorce decree. I did not need to burn it or frame it. It was evidence of growth that no longer required my participation. The anniversary of the original housewarming approached in early autumn. Tessa suggested I hold another party. My first reaction was no. The thought of invitations tightened my chest. Then I walked through the house on a bright Sunday morning and realized I had spent a year letting one ugly evening define what it meant to fill these rooms. So I made a guest list. It included the neighbors who watched the property during the moving day confrontation, the contractors who restored the house, colleagues from the firm, volunteers from the housing nonprofit, Mara, Officer Bell, Lorna, Tessa, my cousins, and the friends who had never confused support with entitlement. I sent a simple digital invitation. Elena Ortiz invites you to Alder House, 1 year finished, fully restored, and finally at peace. There was no gold script and no family crest. I hired the same caterer Carol had used, not because I wanted to recreate the party, but because the food had been excellent, and the caterer had apologized for assuming Carol was the owner. I ordered flowers from a neighborhood shop. I placed no signs on bedroom doors. The only labels in the house identified materials saved during the restoration. Original 1898 tile, reclaimed walnut, locally fabricated brass. On the afternoon before the party, a package arrived without a return address. Inside was the housewarming gift Carol had received beneath my chandelier, a silver serving tray engraved with "The Hartwell Home, Alder Street." A note in Nathan's handwriting lay on top. "This was never ours. I should have said so before you had to." I stood in the kitchen holding the tray. A year earlier, the engraving would have felt like a wound. Now, it looked merely inaccurate. I considered throwing it away. Instead, I brought it to a metalworker who had restored the house numbers. He removed the engraving, polished the surface, and etched a new line in smaller letters. "May every welcome begin with respect." The tray sat on the dining table at the second housewarming, holding glasses of champagne. Nobody mistook the inscription for a deed. The second party began at 5 and belonged to no one person's performance. Children ran between the terrace and garden. Contractors argued affectionately about which hidden defect had been the worst. My colleagues filled the kitchen without rearranging it. Officer Bell arrived off-duty with her wife and brought a small potted lemon tree. Mara stood beneath the chandelier, read the new engraving on the tray, and gave me the smallest approving nod. At 7, Tessa tapped a spoon against her glass. The sound traveled through me like an echo from another life, but this time nobody had claimed a room, copied a key, or scheduled a future on my behalf. I stood where Carol had stood the year before. I thanked the people who had repaired the house, protected it, and helped me remember why I loved it. I thanked my mother, although she was not there, for teaching me that a safe home could be built even if you had never inherited one. I thanked the friends who knew that showing up did not mean taking over. Then I told them the only rule of Alder House. "Everyone invited here should feel welcome," I said, "and nobody's welcome requires someone else to disappear." The applause was softer than it had been at Carol's toast, but it meant more. The evening ended gradually. Guests washed dishes, folded chairs, and carried sleeping children to cars. Nobody lingered as a strategy. At midnight, I closed the door and stood alone in the foyer. Alone was not the word Carol had warned me it would be. It did not mean abandoned, punished, or unloved. It meant I could hear the house settle. It meant every person who had entered did so because I opened the door. It meant the silence belonged to me as completely as the laughter had. I carried the silver tray into the kitchen and washed the last ring of champagne from its surface. Under the warm light, I could still see a faint shadow where the old engraving had been. Metal remembers pressure. So do people. Removal does not restore a surface to untouched perfection. It creates something honest enough to use again. The next morning, the elderly couple next door sent a photograph taken from across the street. Alder House glowed at dusk, while guests laughed beneath the restored transom. From a distance, no one looked like the owner. The house looked generous rather than possessed. I framed it in the library. Months later, the transitional housing nonprofit completed its first full renovation under our partnership. The building contained 12 small apartments for women and children rebuilding their lives. On opening day, I stood in a bright hallway and handed keys to the residents. One woman closed her fingers around hers and cried. It had been years, she said, since she held a key nobody else could demand. I understood her so completely that I had to look away. We designed solid doors, good locks, warm lighting, and storage that did not require residents to live from bags. They were declarations. You are allowed to occupy your own life. That night, I returned to Alder House and unlocked the front door. The lemon tree from Officer Bell sat in the sunroom. The East Studio held rolled plans for our next housing project. A novel lay open in the green reading room. Tessa's forgotten scarf hung over a chair in the guest room, waiting for her next visit. The house was full of traces of other people, but none of them erased me. I thought of Carol's raised glass. She believed saying "our home" before enough people could make it true. Nathan believed moving boxes through the door could turn my refusal into an inconvenience. Dennis believed a man on a driveway held more authority than the woman on the deed. Brianna believed wanting a room was almost the same as being promised one. They were wrong about ownership, but more importantly, they were wrong about home. A house can be purchased, titled, insured, and defended. A home is made from consent repeated in small ways: knocking, asking, listening, returning the key. Family is not a group of people who are entitled to enter. Family is the group that cares whether the door opens willingly. Nathan's last message arrived nearly 2 years after the divorce. He said his parents were renewing their apartment lease and had finally hired a financial counselor. Brianna had taken a job in another city. He had begun saving for a place of his own. He thanked me for returning the grill, which had become a running joke in his therapy sessions. Then he wrote, "I used to think you chose the house over me. I understand now that I kept asking you to choose yourself, and I was angry when you did." I read the message twice. I replied with one sentence: "I hope the home you build next has room for honesty." On the 3rd anniversary, I received a clean title report. The document was dry, technical, and beautiful. It listed the parcel and owner, Elena Marisol Ortiz. One name, mine. I placed it beside my mother's note, then opened every window. Light moved across the floors. The lemon tree had produced 3 small fruits. The house no longer felt like a fortress. It felt like what I wanted from the beginning, a place where safety did not depend on making myself smaller. That evening, friends arrived for dinner without ceremony. Tessa brought bread, Lorna brought wine, Mara brought a folder from the nonprofit and promised not to discuss it until dessert. We ate on the terrace while the sunset turned the brick walls copper. Nobody made a speech. Nobody needed to. When the night cooled, I went inside and held the door while everyone carried plates to the kitchen. The silver tray waited on the table, its new engraving catching the light. May every welcome begin with respect. I had once thought ownership meant never being forced to leave. Now I knew it also meant choosing who could stay.